The alarm screamed through the Vorthik monitoring station like a wounded animal. Senior Communications Officer Zethkar stumbled backward from his console as red lights bathed the control room in bloody darkness. His 6 eyes widened in terror as he read the message flashing across every screen in the facility. Warning. A human warship has entered the sector. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Around him, dozens of alien technicians froze at their workstations. The busy chatter of routine communications monitoring died instantly. Someone dropped a data pad and it clattered to the floor with unusual loudness in the sudden silence. Zethkar's breathing apparatus wheezed as panic set in. His scaled hands shook as he tried to access the emergency protocols buried deep in the station's ancient databases. These warnings had been programmed centuries ago, by species that claimed to have encountered humans before their mysterious disappearance from known space. Most beings considered them myths now, stories told to frighten younglings about the monsters that once roamed the galaxy. Commander Vesara burst through the control room doors, her crystalline carapace clicking against the metal frame. Her telepathic abilities immediately sensed the fear radiating from every being in the room. She had felt the psychic wave of terror from 3 levels away and knew something catastrophic had happened. "Report," she commanded, though her voice carried none of its usual authority. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Zethkar pointed at his screen with a trembling appendage. The automated systems detected it 15 minutes ago. Long-range sensors picked up the energy signature entering our sector from deep space. The computer immediately classified it as a human vessel and triggered all emergency protocols. Vesara moved closer to examine the readouts. The energy signature was unlike anything in their current databases. It pulsed with power levels that seemed impossible for a single vessel. The ship appeared to be roughly 2 kilometers in length, but its mass readings suggested technology far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations possessed. "Are you certain the sensors are functioning correctly?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The Vorthik monitoring station used the most advanced detection equipment in this sector of the galaxy. If it said a human ship had arrived, then the impossible had become reality. "I ran diagnostics 3 times, Zethkar replied. "All systems are operating perfectly." "Commander, the legends say that human ships could crack planets in half." The power readings we're getting suggest those stories might not have been exaggerated. Far from the monitoring station, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Victory, completely unaware of the panic his arrival had caused throughout the sector. He gazed out at the starfield through the main view screen, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness about humanity's first contact with galactic civilization in over 300 years. Morrison was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much of war and exploration. He wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's Stellar Navy with simple rank insignia that would mean nothing to the aliens they were about to encounter. At 45 years old, he had been chosen to lead this historic mission because of his reputation for calm decision-making and diplomatic skills. "Navigation, confirm our position," Morrison said to the young officer at the helm station. Lieutenant Amy Patterson checked her instruments and nodded. "We're exactly where Earth Command wanted us." "Captain." "Kepler 442 sector. Approximately 50 light-years from the last known position of galactic civilization based on our historical records." Patterson was one of the youngest officers aboard the Victory, barely 28 years old, but she had graduated at the top of her class from the Naval Academy. Her expertise in xenolinguistics and communications made her invaluable for this first contact mission. She had spent years studying the ancient alien languages recorded in humanity's databases, preparing for this moment. "Any signs of current civilization?" Morrison asked his science officer. Commander Susan Blake was a methodical woman in her late 30s who had earned her position through decades of service in deep space exploration. Her instruments showed readings that made her frown with concentration. "I'm detecting multiple energy signatures that appear to be artificial in origin. Some kind of monitoring station about 10 astronomical units from our current position?" and what looks like shipping lanes with regular traffic patterns. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. 3 centuries was a long time in galactic terms. When humans had withdrawn from galactic politics, they had done so quietly, simply stopping all communication and disappearing into deep space. Most species had probably assumed humanity had destroyed itself or simply died out. The return of a human vessel would certainly cause confusion, but Morrison hoped it would not cause fear. He had no way of knowing that his ship's advanced technology was already being interpreted as a threat by terrified alien observers. The USS Victory incorporated centuries of human innovation developed during their isolation. Gravitational manipulation drives, quantum phase shielding, and self-repairing hull materials made it unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Back at the monitoring station, Commander Thesara was frantically sending priority communications to the Galactic Council headquarters. Her message was simple but carried implications that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. This is Monitoring Station Kepler 7 reporting a Code Omega situation. Confirmed human vessel has entered our sector, requesting immediate assistance and guidance on first contact protocols. The response came back within minutes, but it was not what Thesara had hoped to hear. Instead of guidance, she received orders to maintain distance and observe while military forces were mobilized. The Galactic Council was treating the human arrival as a potential invasion rather than a diplomatic opportunity. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of monitoring stations and communication hubs throughout the galaxy. The news spread like wildfire through the galactic communication networks. Ancient fears that had been buried for centuries suddenly seemed very real and immediate. On distant worlds, military commanders who had never expected to face human technology began reviewing battle plans that their predecessors had developed based on fragmentary historical records. Emergency meetings were called on council worlds as political leaders tried to decide how to respond to the return of a species that had become more legend than reality. The irony was lost on the panicking aliens that their fear was based on outdated information about human capabilities and intentions. The humans who had left galactic space 3 centuries ago were not the same species that had just returned. During their long isolation, humanity had evolved not just technologically but philosophically, becoming something the galaxy was not prepared to understand or accept. Admiral Crixton of the Zelhari Federation received the emergency alert while reviewing routine patrol reports in his flagship's command center. The message made his blood run cold and his 4 hearts beat in an irregular rhythm that his medical implants immediately flagged as dangerous stress levels. The Zelhari were one of the most militarily advanced species in the galaxy, with a fleet that had never known defeat in over 2 centuries of expansion. Crixton himself had commanded victories against 17 different hostile species and was considered one of the greatest tactical minds of his generation. But the prospect of facing human technology made him feel like a newly hatched recruit. Facing his first battle, he immediately activated the Federation's emergency response protocols and began assembling the largest fleet in Zelhari history. Within hours, over 300 ships were moving toward the Kepler 442 sector at maximum warp speed. Battle cruisers, destroyers, and massive dreadnought-class vessels all converged on the coordinates where the human ship had been detected. The historical records about human military capabilities were fragmentary but terrifying. Ancient data cores spoke of human vessels that could move faster than thought possible and weapons that could turn entire fleets into cosmic dust in seconds. Most disturbing were the reports about human crews who never retreated, never surrendered, and fought with a ferocity that other species could not comprehend. Captain Jake Morrison was enjoying a quiet meal in his ready room when Lieutenant Patterson's voice came through the communication system with unusual urgency. "Captain, you need to get to the bridge immediately. We have a situation developing." Morrison set down his coffee and made his way to the bridge, where he found his senior staff gathered around the tactical display with expressions of concern and confusion. The main screen showed dozens of red contacts approaching their position from multiple directions. "Report," Morrison said as he took his command chair. Commander Blake turned from her science station with a grim expression. Captain, we're detecting a massive fleet of alien vessels converging on our position. Current count is over 300 ships of various classes, all showing weapons hot and shields raised. Patterson looked up from her communications console with frustration evident in her voice. Sir, I've been trying to establish contact for the past 20 minutes. They're not responding to any of our standard diplomatic hails on any frequency. The universal translators are having difficulty with their languages, but I'm picking up fragments that suggest they're demanding our immediate surrender. Morrison studied the tactical display with growing concern. The approaching fleet was enormous by any standard, representing firepower that could glass entire planets. Whatever had prompted this response, it was clear that humanity's return to galactic space was not being welcomed with open arms. Any idea what triggered this level of military response? Morrison asked his tactical officer, Commander Susan Blake. Blake shook her head while reviewing sensor data. Nothing we've done should be interpreted as hostile. We've maintained a peaceful approach vector, shields are at minimum power, and weapon systems are completely offline. Captain, I think our mere presence is what's causing this reaction. The truth was beginning to dawn on Morrison that 3 centuries of human absence had allowed myths and legends to grow around his species. The approaching alien fleet was not responding to any specific threat, but to the fear that had been building in their collective consciousness for generations. On the bridge of the Zelhari flagship, Admiral Crixton studied the human vessel through long-range sensors with a mixture of professional admiration and deep fear. The ship was beautiful in its simplicity, with clean lines and no obvious weapon ports or defensive systems. To his experienced eye, this lack of visible armaments was more terrifying than if the vessel had been bristling with guns. Analysis. He commanded his science officer. The younger Zelhari officer consulted his instruments with obvious nervousness. Admiral, the energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. The ship appears to be powered by some form of controlled gravitational manipulation that we don't understand. Hull composition is unknown, but it's reflecting our sensor scans in ways that suggest technology far beyond our current capabilities. Crixton's tactical advisor, a battle-scarred veteran named Vexahul, leaned closer to the Admiral. Sir, recommend we maintain maximum distance and demand surrender through all available channels. Historical records suggest that human vessels become exponentially more dangerous at close range. The Admiral nodded and activated the fleet communication system. All vessels maintain current distance and prepare for combat operations. Target the human ship, but do not fire unless fired upon. Attempt to establish communication and demand immediate surrender. Meanwhile, on the USS Victory, Lieutenant Patterson was finally making progress with the alien communications. The universal translators had adapted to the primary language being used by the fleet, and she was able to understand the basic meaning of their demands. Captain, I'm getting clearer translations now. They're identifying themselves as the Zelhari Federation, and they're demanding that we power down all systems and prepare to be boarded. They're also transmitting what appears to be historical data about human military actions, but the information is centuries out of date. Morrison realized that the galaxy's fear of humanity was based on who humans had been before their exile, not who they had become. The species that had left galactic civilization 3 centuries ago had indeed been more aggressive and militaristic. But humanity's long isolation had fundamentally changed them, though the aliens had no way of knowing this. Open a channel, Morrison ordered. All frequencies, maximum power. When Patterson nodded to indicate the channel was open, Morrison stood and spoke with calm authority. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Victory. We come in peace as representatives of humanity, seeking to re-establish diplomatic relations with galactic civilization. We mean no harm to any species and request the opportunity for peaceful dialogue. The response from Admiral Crixton came back immediately, transmitted on a frequency that every ship in both fleets could hear. Human vessel, you are surrounded and outnumbered. Power down your systems immediately and submit to inspection. Any aggressive action will be met with overwhelming force. Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people who had volunteered for what they thought would be a historic diplomatic mission. Instead, they found themselves facing the largest hostile fleet any human had encountered in centuries, with no apparent way to convince their opposition that their intentions were peaceful. The standoff continued for several tense hours, with both sides maintaining their positions while communications attempts grew increasingly frustrated. The aliens refused to believe that humans could have changed from the aggressive warriors of legend, while the humans struggled to understand why their peaceful approach was being met with such overwhelming military force. Captain Morrison made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. He could see the fear and confusion in his crew's faces as they remained surrounded by hundreds of alien warships demanding their surrender. The standoff had lasted 6 hours with no progress in communication, and Morrison knew that someone would eventually make a mistake that could lead to unnecessary bloodshed. "Chief Rogers, I need you to prepare a demonstration of our defensive capabilities," Morrison said to his chief engineer over the internal communication system, Chief Petty Officer. Danny Rogers was a stocky man in his 40s who had spent 20 years working with humanity's most advanced propulsion and defensive systems. His expertise with gravitational manipulation technology made him one of the most valuable members of the crew, though he preferred working in the engine room to standing on the bridge during tense situations. "What kind of demonstration are you thinking, Captain?" Rogers asked through the comm system. Morrison studied the tactical display showing the positions of the alien fleet. "Something that will end this standoff without destroying their ships or killing their crews. Can you use our gravitational drives to disable their weapon systems without harming the vessels themselves?" There was a brief pause as Rogers considered. "The technical requirements? I can create a localized space-time distortion that would disrupt their energy flow to weapon systems. It would be like turning off a light switch for about 50 ships at once. No permanent damage, but it would make our point clear." "Do it," Morrison ordered. Rogers worked quickly in the engineering section, adjusting the Victory's gravitational manipulation drives to create a controlled demonstration of human technological superiority. The drives that normally propelled the ship through space were reconfigured to generate a precise gravitational wave that would interact with the alien vessel's power distribution systems on the bridge of Admiral Crixton's flagship. The tactical officer suddenly looked up from his console with alarm. "Admiral, the human vessel is generating some kind of energy field. Power levels are increasing rapidly." Crixton felt his 4 hearts skip several beats as he prepared for what he assumed would be humanity's opening attack. "All ships prepare for combat. Target the human vessel and fire on my command." Before he could give the order to fire, something impossible happened. 50 ships in his fleet suddenly went dark as their weapon systems powered down completely. Not just offline, but completely drained of energy, as if someone had reached inside each vessel and turned off a switch. Life support remained functional, basic systems continued operating. But every weapon on 50 different ships had been simultaneously and precisely disabled. The demonstration lasted exactly 30 seconds before the affected ship's weapon systems came back online as if nothing had happened. But the message was unmistakable. The human vessel had reached across space and selectively disabled military systems on 50 ships without affecting anything else. The precision required for such an action was beyond anything in the Zalhari Federation's understanding of physics. "How is that possible?" Crixton whispered to his science officer. The young Zalhari's voice shook as he read his instruments. "Admiral, I don't understand the technology involved. They somehow created a localized gravitational effect that interfered with our power distribution networks. The precision required suggests they could have destroyed those ships just as easily as they disabled them." Morrison activated the communication system again, hoping that his demonstration had made the intended impression. "Admiral Crixton, we have shown you that we possess defensive capabilities beyond your current technology. We could have destroyed your ships, but we chose to demonstrate restraint. Will you now agree to peaceful dialogue?" The response came after several minutes of silence from the alien fleet. When Crixton finally spoke, his voice carried a mixture of awe and fear. Human Captain, your demonstration has been noted. I'm willing to discuss terms for a meeting, but understand that my government views your presence as a potential threat to galactic security. Morrison selected his best diplomatic officer for the crucial face-to-face meeting. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes was a former Marine who had retrained as a diplomatic specialist after humanity's military doctrine had evolved during their isolation period. At 38 years old, Hayes combined the tactical awareness of a soldier with the communication skills of a career diplomat. Hayes would be accompanied by Dr. Lisa Shun, a xenobiologist who specialized in first contact protocols, and Commander Kevin Brown, a cultural specialist who had spent years studying ancient records of alien civilizations. The three-person team represented humanity's best hope for establishing peaceful relations with the galactic community. The diplomatic shuttle that carried Hayes and his team to the Zelhari flagship was itself a marvel of human engineering. Barely 20 meters long, it incorporated the same gravitational manipulation technology as the Victory, but in a much smaller package. The aliens watched in fascination as the shuttle approached their massive flagship without any visible propulsion. System. Hayes felt nervous as he prepared to meet aliens for the first time in human history, at least from his perspective. The airlock cycled, and he found himself face to face with beings that looked like a combination of insect and reptile, with crystalline carapaces and multiple eyes that seemed to track his every movement. Admiral Crixton was larger than Hayes had expected, standing nearly 3 meters tall with a presence that commanded respect even across species barriers. The Zelhari leader's forearms moved in what Hayes hoped were peaceful gestures as they were escorted to a conference room deep within the alien flagship. "You are smaller than our records suggested," Crixton said through a translation device that converted his complex vocal patterns into understandable speech. Hayes nodded diplomatically. "Our species has evolved considerably during our absence from galactic civilization. We are no longer the people described in your historical records." Dr. Chen had been quietly observing the aliens since their arrival, taking notes on their biological characteristics and social behaviors. What she saw surprised her. These beings showed obvious signs of fear and stress, but they were making genuine efforts to be hospitable despite their concerns about human intentions. Commander Brown studied the decorations and layout of the conference room, noting details that would help him understand Zelhari culture and hierarchy. The aliens had clearly prepared for this meeting carefully, with symbols and arrangements that he recognized as diplomatic protocols from humanity's ancient databases. "Admiral," Hayes began carefully, "our records indicate that humans and the Zelhari Federation had peaceful relations before our departure from galactic space. We hope to restore that relationship and establish new diplomatic ties with all species in the galactic community." Crixton's multiple eyes focused on Hayes with an intensity that was slightly unsettling. "Your species disappeared 3 centuries ago without explanation. Our governments prepared for your eventual return, but we expected you to come back as conquerors, not diplomats. Your demonstration of technological superiority has confirmed our worst fears about human military capabilities." The meeting continued for several hours as Hayes tried to explain humanity's transformation during their isolation, while Crixton shared the galaxy's perspective on human history and the fears that had developed during their absence. The diplomatic meeting between Lieutenant Colonel Hayes and Admiral Crixton was interrupted by an urgent alert that made every alien in the conference room freeze with terror. The Zelhari flagship's warning systems activated with a sound that Hayes had never heard before, a deep harmonic tone that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull and into his bones. "Admiral." Crixton received a priority communication through his personal device, and his 4 eyes widened with a fear that was even greater than what Hayes had seen when discussing human capabilities. The alien leader's voice shook as he translated the message for his human guests. "Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim," Crixton said, his multiple arms gesturing frantically at holographic displays that appeared around the conference table. "The Devourers have accelerated their advance toward our sector." Hayes looked at Dr. Chun and Commander Brown with confusion. The name meant nothing to any of the humans, but the terror it caused in their alien hosts was unmistakable. Every Zelhari in the room was showing signs of panic that made their earlier fear of human technology seem mild by comparison. Who are the Devourers? Hayes asked carefully. Crixton activated a holographic display that showed the outer regions of the galaxy. Red markers indicated the path of destruction moving steadily inward toward civilized space. They appeared at the galactic edge 18 months ago. We don't know where they came from, but they consume everything in their path. Entire star systems disappear as they pass through, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The display showed dozens of star systems that had simply vanished, creating a trail of darkness that stretched across thousands of light years. Dr. Chun studied the data with growing alarm as she realized the scale of destruction involved. Billions of lives had been lost to whatever force the aliens called the Devourers. What kind of technology could consume entire star systems? Commander Brown asked. We don't understand their methods, Crixton replied. Our greatest scientists have studied the phenomenon for months without finding answers. Ships that encounter the Devourers are never seen again. Planets are stripped of all matter down to their cores. Even the stars themselves seem to be drained of energy and extinguished. Hayes activated his communication device to contact Captain Morrison aboard the Victory. The situation had clearly moved beyond simple first contact protocols and required immediate consultation with Earth Command. Captain, we have a developing crisis that requires your immediate attention, Hayes reported. The aliens are facing an invasion force that has been consuming star systems throughout the outer galaxy. They call them the Devourers. Morrison's voice came back through the communication system with concern evident in his tone. Colonel, are you saying there's an active threat to galactic civilization that's more immediate than our first contact situation? That appears to be the case, sir. The aliens have been so focused on preparing for humanity's return that they may have missed the real danger approaching their territory. Back on the Victory, Morrison called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The mission parameters had suddenly changed from diplomatic contact to potential military engagement against an unknown threat. Everything humanity had planned for this mission was now secondary to the crisis developing at the Galactic Rim. Commander Blake presented her analysis of the data the aliens had shared about the Devourers. Captain, the energy signatures and destruction patterns suggest technology that's even more advanced than our current capabilities. Whatever these beings are, they represent a threat to all galactic civilization. Dr. Chun's voice came through the communication system from the alien flagship with an urgent update. Captain, I've been analyzing the Devourer attack patterns with Admiral Crixton's science teams. There's something disturbing about their tactical approach. The Devourers seem to be learning and adapting their strategies as they encounter different types of resistance. Morrison felt a cold realization forming in his mind. Doctor, are you suggesting that these Devourers have encountered human technology before? The data suggests that possibility, sir. Some of the tactical innovations they've displayed in recent attacks show characteristics that are consistent with human strategic thinking. It's possible they encountered and absorbed some of our outer colonies during their approach to the galaxy. The implications were staggering. If the Devourers had indeed encountered human settlements during their advance, they would have access to 3 centuries of human technological development. The very innovations that made humanity superior to current galactic civilization could now be turned against them by an enemy that showed no interest in communication or mercy. Morrison activated the quantum entanglement communication system. That connected the Victory directly to Earth Command. The technology allowed instantaneous communication across any distance, but it required enormous amounts of energy and was reserved for only the most critical situations. Admiral Patricia Ward's image appeared on the main screen of the Victory's bridge. She was a stern woman in her 60s who commanded humanity's entire colonial fleet from Earth's orbital command station. Her expression showed that she had been expecting this communication. Captain Morrison, report your status, Ward commanded. Admiral, We've made contact with galactic civilization, but the situation has become complicated. There's an invasion force called the Devourers that has been consuming star systems throughout the outer galaxy. The aliens believe this force may have encountered human technology during their advance. Ward nodded grimly. Captain, it's time you learned the real reason for your mission. Earth Command has been tracking the Devourer advance for 8 months through our deep space monitoring networks. Your deployment to this sector was not intended as a simple diplomatic mission. Morrison felt the pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. Ma'am, are you saying that Earth knew about this threat before we left? Humanity's exile from galactic civilization was never meant to be permanent, Captain. We withdrew to prepare for threats that other species couldn't comprehend. The Devourers represent exactly the kind of existential danger we've been developing countermeasures for during the past 3 centuries. The truth began to emerge that humanity's long absence from galactic space had been a calculated preparation period rather than simple isolation. Earth scientists and military planners had detected signs of the Devourer threat decades ago, and had spent the intervening time developing technology specifically designed to counter this type of enemy. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Morrison asked. Ward's expression showed the weight of command decisions that could determine the fate of galactic civilization. "Captain, you are hereby authorized to engage the Devourer force with all necessary resources. Additional human vessels are already en route to your position with specialized equipment designed for this type of conflict." Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had volunteered for what they thought would be a peaceful diplomatic mission. But now they found themselves on the front lines of a war that would determine whether galactic civilization survived or joined the growing trail of darkness at the galaxy's edge, the USS. Victory's mission had evolved from establishing peaceful contact with alien civilizations to defending those same civilizations against a threat that could extinguish all life in the galaxy. Captain Morrison gathered Admiral Crixton and the leadership of the alien fleet aboard the Victory for an emergency conference that would reveal the truth about humanity's 3-century absence from galactic civilization. The alien commanders entered the human ship with obvious nervousness, but their fear of the approaching Devourers outweighed their concerns about human intentions. The Victory's main conference room had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate the various alien physiologies represented in the gathering. Zelhari Vorthak and representatives from 6 other species sat around a holographic display table that showed the current tactical situation across the sector. Morrison activated the display system and began revealing information that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood humanity's role in galactic civilization. 3 centuries ago, when humanity withdrew from galactic space, it was not because of political differences or military defeat. We detected early warning signs of a threat approaching from beyond the galactic rim. Admiral Crixton's 4 eyes focused intently on the human captain. "You knew about the Devourers before they arrived?" "Our deep space monitoring networks detected gravitational anomalies and energy signatures that suggested something was consuming matter on a massive scale in the space between galaxies," Morrison explained. "Earth scientists calculated that this force would eventually reach our galaxy, and we realized that existing galactic civilization was not prepared to face such a threat." Dr. Chung, who had returned from the alien flagship, added her analysis to the briefing. "During our isolation, humanity focused all of our technological development on creating countermeasures for this specific type of enemy. Every advancement we made was designed with the Devourers in mind." Commander Blake activated additional displays that showed the approaching Devourer fleet in detail. The enemy force consisted of hundreds of dark vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in the galactic databases, suggesting technology that operated on principles no known species understood. "The Devourers have been learning from every civilization they encounter," Blake explained. "Our analysis suggests they absorb not just matter and energy, but information and technology as well. This makes them more dangerous with each system they consume." Chief Engineer Danny Rogers joined the briefing to explain the technical aspects of humanity's preparations. The Victory and ships like her were designed specifically to counter Devourer technology. Our gravitational manipulation drives can disrupt their matter absorption systems, and our quantum phase weapons can damage their vessels in ways that conventional energy weapons cannot. The alien commanders listened with growing amazement as they realized that humanity had spent 3 centuries preparing for a war that other species didn't even know was coming. The technology that had seemed impossibly advanced during their first encounter was revealed to be the result of focused development against a specific enemy. Morrison activated the quantum communication system to contact additional human vessels that were approaching the sector. Admiral Ward, please confirm the status of the defensive fleet. Ward's image appeared on the holographic display, and her presence seemed to fill the conference room with authority. Captain, the Titan and the Guardian are 3 hours from your position. The Defender and Phoenix will arrive within 6 hours. All vessels are equipped with the latest anti-Devourer weapon systems. The alien commanders exchanged glances of surprise and relief. They had expected to face the Devourer invasion with the same conventional weapons that had proven useless in previous encounters. The arrival of human vessels specifically designed to counter this threat represented the first hope they had experienced in months. "What are your battle plans?" Admiral Crixton asked. Morrison gestured to the tactical display, which now showed the positions of both the approaching Devourer fleet and the human vessels moving to intercept them. "We will establish a defensive line at the edge of this star system. Our ships will engage the Devourers using weapons and tactics they have not encountered before, while your fleets provide support and protection for civilian populations." The battle began 6 hours later when the Devourer fleet entered the outer edge of the star system. The enemy vessels moved with perfect coordination, their dark hulls seeming to bend space around them as they advanced toward the inner planets where billions of alien civilians waited in terror. The human ships met them at the defensive line with weapons that had never been used in actual combat. The USS Victory fired its first quantum phase torpedo and watched as the projectile passed through conventional shields and armor to detonate inside a Devourer vessel. The enemy ship, which had survived direct hits from entire alien fleets, cracked apart and exploded in a brilliant flash of released energy. Commander Blake coordinated the human fleet's attack patterns while maintaining communication with the alien forces. "All human vessels, target the lead Devourer ships with quantum phase weapons. Alien fleet, focus your fire on any Devourer vessels that break through our defensive line." The battle raged for 8 hours as human technology proved its effectiveness against an enemy that had seemed invincible. The Victory's gravitational manipulation drives created space-time distortions that disrupted the Devourer's matter absorption systems, while the quantum phase weapons bypassed their adaptive defenses. Chief Rogers worked frantically in the engineering section to maintain the Victory's advanced systems under combat conditions. "Captain, the gravitational drives are performing beyond specifications. We can maintain this level of output for at least 12 more hours." The tide of battle turned when Captain Morrison ordered a coordinated attack by all 4 human vessels against the largest Devourer ship. The combined firepower of humanity's most advanced weapon systems overwhelmed the enemy vessel's defenses and destroyed it in an explosion that could be seen from the inner planets, with their command ship destroyed. The remaining Devourer vessels began to retreat toward the galactic rim. The alien fleets, emboldened by the human Victory, pursued the fleeing enemy and destroyed several more ships before they escaped into deep space. Admiral Crixton's voice came through the communication system with awe and gratitude. "Captain Morrison, your species has accomplished what we thought was impossible. You have defeated the Devourers and saved countless lives throughout this sector." Morrison stood on his bridge and looked out at the aftermath of humanity's first major military engagement in 3 centuries. The warning that had terrified the galaxy when his ship first arrived had proven prophetic, but not in the way anyone had expected. "Admiral, the warning your monitoring stations detected was correct. Morrison said. A human warship had entered the sector. But we came not as conquerors, but as protectors of galactic civilization. In the weeks that followed, Captain Morrison accepted a permanent position as humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council. The USS Victory became the flagship of a new era of cooperation between humans and aliens, with the understanding that humanity had returned not to dominate but to defend the galaxy they had never truly abandoned.